Welcome back to our channel. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, your time. Thank you guys for your continued support. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't and turn on the bell for more video. Welcome our new members to the old ones. God bless you. If you're passing by, please join us. As you're supporting us, may the Lord support you in everything you lay your hands. Amen. To the news in details. Guys, the video you're about to watch is an exclusive interview with Abaribe, Senator Abaribe. And he's not maximizing his words. He's saying it the way it is, not minding the consequences. He's a man that has always stood for the truth and speaks what he believes in, not minding if it's going to get him in trouble. I'm going to let us into the video, but before then, please do not leave here without subscribing and turning on the bell for more video. Kindly share out our videos with families and friends to create more awareness and educate them. Guys, leave your comments in the section below. Please watch and I will see us on my next video.
Responsible for perceived or real gripes over marginalization from the Southeast region?
Well, Ladi, I think that we had this conversation 18 months ago, sometime in 2019.
Yes.
And all it reminds me of today is what I learned when we were doing elementary French in the secondary school. There's said, plus sachant, plus a même chose. In other words, the more things change, the more they remain the same. I've not seen any change. There is no administration that has come that has not tried to get to grips with infrastructure. And so nobody can say today, we're giving you infrastructure. They're not giving us infrastructure more than they're giving any other zone in the country. On the contrary, the infrastructure that is being given, especially in the rail infrastructure, is much less than in other zones, even though it's being done by a loan that all of us are going to pay for. So the infrastructure part, nobody can come to tell me, don't worry, we're doing infrastructure. No, that does not. Yes, of course, we agree that roads are being done, but they're not being completed. Of course, the normal thing that the APC-led government does, anytime you I want to remind them that they came into office in order, as they said, to change what had happened in the past. They now fall back to tell you, after all, they didn't do it in the past. That was the reason why you were elected. So when they come into with that type of disingenuous argument, some of us just look at it and we say, well, we don't expect anything else. On the side of, like you said, that the Honorable Minister said in terms of appointments and all that, it's not just appointments. It is the pervasive feeling that you people are second-class citizens. And I'll just give you 3 instances to tell you the mindset of those who are in charge in the country today. And that is why the Southeast people don't feel very comfortable with this administration. First, Danladi Umar of the Code of Conduct found in an altercation with some people in somewhere that he went to do some shopping. He was dealing at that time with a guard from Benue, not an Igbo person. And when there was a hula bolo coming out of it, The next thing, he told his media person to say that Biafra boys attacked him. How could somebody? In other words, there are some part of this country that they call Biafra people, who are supposed to be the bad people. Then we go to the next one, and the southern governors made a strong statement about the law, because all that they said, no open grazing, because the land use decree gives the governors the right to determine the usage of land. And then the Attorney General of the Federation, who's supposed to be chief law officer, in responding to the southern governor, say, oh, what you're doing is the same thing as spare parts, banning spare parts in parts of the north. And everybody, of course, knows that the spare part dealers are mostly from the southeast. And then the third one, and the one that was the most painful cut for most of the people from the southeast, is when Mr. President was doing his interview in Arise Television, and there was a question about the IPOB. I said, oh, don't worry those people. They're just a dot, and they have businesses and property all over the country. In other words, equating everybody who is from the southeast, who has a business elsewhere from the southeast, as IPOB. So that gives you the mindset. And so when we talk about marginalization, anybody in the southeast, what they see is you don't belong. You understand me? That's all that they see. So if the president, for example, is required under the law to go ahead and appoint people, one per state, that is a requirement of the law. And so, for even all those people that he appoints from other places, the ones that he is comfortable with, they also have the same minister coming from their place. And so you're not doing us a favor. But it comes out when the statement is made by him and all. After all, did we not appoint you? Come on.
When last I spoke to you, I put the question to you then that do you think zoning the position of president and all that comes with it to the southeast could help assuage some of these feelings of being left out, some of these feelings of injustice and so on, as a deliberate act? People point to the fact that in 1998, when there was the transition program that led to the Fourth Republic, there was a deliberate effort on the part of the elite, military and civilian, to say, look, the 1993 election that led to all the trouble that finally culminated in both the death of the then head of state, General Abacha, and then subsequently the death of the winner of the election, Chief Abiola, necessitates us as a country to say, okay, look, let's assuage that feeling in the case of the Southwest. And so at that time, you had the major parties zoning their tickets to the Southwest. And of course, at the end of the day, someone from the Southwest did emerge president. I put that question to your former colleague, and he said he felt so, even though it was not written in the Constitution, and that was what gave him some level of fear, that because that item was in the 1995 Constitution, but it isn't in the 1999 Constitution. Do you agree with him
let's talk about what is in the Constitution or not. Britain doesn't have a constitution. I'm sure you know that. But they still run a parliamentary democracy. And there are some laws, and there are some things, and there are some ways that people do things, which has been accepted by everybody. And so whenever people resort to saying, oh, it's not here or there, you know that they're trying to avoid dealing with the issues, even without something being in the Constitution. I think the particular section of the Constitution, I think section 5 or so, says that you have to run the country in such a way as to engender unity and all that. So you can find justification in the Constitution if you want to. It's once you don't want to that you always have to, try to find.
But it does seem as if there's some level of consensus building around that idea, regardless of whether or not it is in the Constitution.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And that's why I pointed you to what was not even in the British Constitution that is being done. So what goes on today actually is really that there's always an effort. People who genuinely think that the country should move forward will look and say, why don't we go this way or go that way? And of course, those who also have vested interest will say it's not there, show us where it is. I don't think there's everything that happens in a country that can be put in a constitution. How would you cover every aspect of life? You won't be able to. But there are some good things that you know that if you do it, it will lead us to a better union. Let's just put it that way. And so, the consensus building around saying, assuming this part of the country is brought in, let's just say that, and that will help each and every one of us, but I remember also that on our last interview, I also told you that as much as all these things are good, it is the intention of how somebody wants to do something that actually assuages you. Listen, if, for example, Mr. President had not described all of us as the Igbos as a dot in a circle, do you think people will be angry? If his expressions that day was something that was not so disdainful, I don't think people will have felt so bad. So the idea of always feeling that, oh, except you do A, B, C, D, no. People look at your intentions, people look at how you act, people look at how you carry yourself. I think one of the popular T-shirts being sold around the Southeast now is One Dot Nation. People have now appropriated it and said, oh yes. Another one is Onye Dot. They've now turned it into, okay, it's a badge of honor. It's actually tells you that it is not the make us president or all that. That is the key issue. The key issue is, can we be accepted? You understand, in your thinking as, we look at it, and of course, when politicians like me talk, we reduce it to, of course, specifics of give me this position or that position. But that's not really the point. As leaders in the Southeast, we had a parley with the defense minister and a federal government delegation that they came to see us, and we appreciated it. But one question arose out of that meeting. On that same week, more than 100 people were killed in Kebbi. Ditto for Zamfara and all those people. And nobody sent any delegation to go and have a parley with all the leaders of that place. Meanwhile, that same week we had a parley. How many people were actually killed in the southeast? And so, if you're from the southeast, the question you ask yourself is, why am I being treated differently? Don't forget that at that same time, and I think there's still some 100 and something pupils that had been kidnapped and are still in Niger State. Nobody has sent a delegation to say, why you people? You know, so it gives you a sense that because it's you, the treatment has to be different.
The thing is
that's the point, really.
That's not strictly the narrative. In the case of Kebbi and Zamfara and Niger, I don't know whether the phrase to use is those are naturally occurring incidents.
How can you? No, Laddie, please don't go there. How can you say killing of people naturally occurring?
When I say naturally occurring, what I mean is that I don't think those can be described as organized crimes, bar the kidnapping, of course. But in the case of the Southeast, the targeting of police stations, the burning down of police stations, the raiding of their armories, correctional facilities, the killing of prominent and not so prominent figures, some as collateral damage while going after others, and consistent over a period. It wasn't a one-off. It happened over a fairly lengthy period. So if a federal government delegation was to come and speak to the leaders of the Southeast to say, what's going on here? Perhaps, I'm not a member of the federal delegation and I'm not in the East, but perhaps that one is considered of far more consequence in terms of security.
Understand what I said from the beginning. I said that it was salutary and we welcomed it. You understand? Suppose this type of incidences going on, because that, and we totally condemn it, and we said we're not supporting it. We don't know who is doing it. We are not part of whoever is doing it, and we totally condemn. We're saying to the federal government, help us to be able to arrest this. That's why I said that it was welcome, it was salutary, it was good. But in the grand scheme of things, why was it, so necessary? Assuming the federal government has said, no, we're sending a delegation to every zone, we would have said, fine. Because people were also being, these same things, this same phenomena was happening in the South-South. Some happened in the Southwest.
Well, I do recollect that there were delegations that visited some of those.
There was no delegation. It was the Southeast that had now a federal government delegation. And so, if it's you, you will naturally also feel, why am I being singled out?
Perhaps also, because now that you mention it, it also comes up there's a challenge to state authority in the Southeast, just like there is elsewhere. But in the case of the Southeast, it was demonstrated. I'll give you an example. You'll be giving me examples. Let me give you an example.
Okay, good.
On May the 30th,
yes,
IPOB asked everyone in the Southeast to stay at home.
Yes.
The governors of the Southeast said people should go about their businesses, that IPOB was unrecognized and was, in fact, was banned, that so they couldn't give such orders.
Yes.
But on the day, from all the reports we got, from the visuals, the pictures, and from eyewitness testimony, people chose, and I'm going to put that in parentheses, people chose to obey IPOB because most of the states had their streets empty.
Yes.
That was a practical demonstration of the challenge to recognized authority because people chose to obey that organization as opposed to the established authority.
Yes.
So in that kind of situation, don't you think, and that has not been replicated anywhere else in the country. So, I mean, does that not present some kind of reason for concern if the authorities in the Southeast are not able to control?
So let's put it this way. Prior to that time had been this phenomenon of killings, burnings, and all that, and a general state of fear, and a general state of people not knowing what tomorrow was going to bring. And the instruments that the government uses to impose order was challenged. You understand? And so when that was happening, what you now saw was a sense of trepidation. On the one hand, the IPOB people are saying, don't go anywhere. If you come out, whatever happens to you is up to you. And on the other hand, the government is saying, no, go your own way. Don't bother about it. We will protect you. And they knew that protection from the state was in very short supply. Haven't had all these attacks and all that. And so, if you're a citizen, what will you do? You will say safety first. If I sit inside my house, at least nobody's going to come in here. So you now have two things occurring. The genuine outpouring of grief for the 3 million and so people who died during the Civil War. And on the other hand, the palpable fear that if I go out today, who knows what is going to happen to me. So it's a combination of all those things that now led to you seeing people stay indoors. One other thing that I think is also lost in the narrative is that the question of that day as the day for remembrance was actually started by Ohaneze years earlier and given Philip by IPOB now. And you could see that the governors who had threatened that they were going to, later said, no, you can now stay in your house, don't go anywhere, we're not going to do anything again and all that. I think Governor Mai did so, and the governor of Abia did so, and so forth. So, and subsequently, I think the governors now said, okay, so we'll now adopt this, we're not going to make it a public holiday, and so on and so forth. But let's also note that at the end of the everything, at the root of everything, is also this pervasive feeling by people in the Southeast that just like history of the Civil War was completely obliterated from our curriculum, that there is also an effort to make sure that we don't remember our dead. There's hardly any household in the Southeast that did not lose a member to that civil war. Don't forget also that prior to that, there had also been the whole threat of, we'll deal with you people if you do this. So there's just too many combinations that I think that going forward, what we actually should do is always, as people do when you lose somebody and there is no closure, we find a way of having a closure. If, as the Southeast governors have done now by saying, okay, we agree, we will now celebrate it, we will now do it, you will now find that there will now no longer be any state power versus this power. And we now can move on with our lives. At every point, we always feel that enough attention is not being paid to the concerns of people. There was a civil war. We can run away from that. People died. Children, adults, soldiers, non-soldiers. And it culminated in a generation or two of people from the Southeast being lost. And nobody wants a repeat of that. And the only way you make sure that there is no repeat is that you remember. You don't suppress. You try as much as possible to understand so that all the subsequent generations, when they understand what had led to that, they no longer would do things that may lead us to such positions. So maybe what happened in this last May 30th was salutary in the sense that it has now dawned on all government and the citizens alike that we need to always remember.
I'm going to bring you to the National Assembly and the issue of constitutional amendment and how, if it's possible, especially against the backdrop of the rally cry for restructuring, it can make any sizable difference. But I still want to hold on to this topic of the Southeast and the issue of state actors versus non-state actors. If IPOB has been banned, it's been labeled a terrorist organization, and yet its leader is outside the country, but still manages to have this, I don't know if the word is grip, on certain segments of the Southeast population. We've just talked about May the 30th, and as you said, IPOB didn't start it, but IPOB gave it the fillip. Yeah. And it now appears as if the helmsmen in the State East are now compelled to follow the IPOB example. Are you seeing, perhaps imperceptible at the point, but becoming stronger, that the balance of power is shifting? Because if people are following these non-state actors, and that, I must concede, is not only in the Southeast, it's happening in the Southwest as well. It's happening in some cases in the South too, even in the northern parts of the country. But I'm focusing on the Southeast because that one appears to be the one that is most apparent in terms of the shift. Do you not then see a situation where these non-state actors may begin to call more and more of the shots against the established actors like yourself?
No, I think what's going on is simple, and we need to always understand it. If you do not have opportunities being given to people and a vacuum is created, something will fill that vacuum. And I think that what you're seeing is some non-state actors filling the vacuum that ought to have been filled by the state actors. That's all that you're saying. And the reason is also fairly straightforward. If I seek security and you're unable to provide it as a state actor, and a non-state actor says, I'm providing it, and goes ahead to show it, what you see is people drifting to what they think will be able to provide them with that security they want. If I, as a state actor, am unable to bring what we now call dividends of society, of the democracy to the people, and if we are unable to do that, and a non-state actor now shows up and says, you see the reason why they can't even do it, but if you follow me to an El Dorado, I will give it to you. So you can see that these are merely
But why are the state actors not able to do it? I mean,
well,
now,
you have just said now that
no, let me give
it's all over the country.
Yes, but in the particular case,
so I do not think that you can locate it in the southeast.
No, I'm locating in the southeast because we've been following the narrative.
Yes.
And you mentioned now that, I mean, these non-state actors tend to give the impression that the state actors are not providing. We will provide, provided you follow us along these lines. Why are the state actors not providing? In the southeast, you have governors of both parties. Incidentally, it's one of the zones where there's a fairly equal mix now of the governors of both parties. There are PDP governors there are APC governors, there's even an APGA governor in the southeast. They have senators like you, again, APC, PDP. You are their leader, incidentally, in the case of the PDP in the Senate. And I'm wondering, issues like constituency projects, the governors and the issue of roads and so, why is it then that people don't seem to see all those things and they're following these non-state actors?
I don't think that it can be put in black and white that way. You will have it in shades of gray. People provide, things are there, but we have a very serious problem of lack of opportunities, youth unemployment, adult underemployment, and of course, the fact that there are two Nigerias today. I think Osita Chidoka had aptly described one as Nigeria, which is the old decrepit one, and there's a Niger, which is the newer.
Right.
And so you are seeing people, those who are able to successfully migrate from Nigeria to Niger do well. And so they are the people who are into the new economy of, the internet, cryptocurrency, music, art, and all that, and have a wider, worldwide market. Let me just put it that way. And so if you're in the old one and you're unable to fit into this new one because of maybe lack of education, maybe lack of opportunities, and so forth, so you feel frustrated. And if you feel frustrated and you don't see any hope in this thing, and of course, the government is not providing hope. Because usually what most governments do is to draw up something and said, if we go, don't worry, in the next ABC, we will get to that place. Then maybe somebody can say, okay, let me wait, because there's still some light at the end of the tunnel. But when it looks very bleak, any person telling you there's somewhere better, for lack of an alternative, you may decide to follow. What I'm saying is that there is far much more to this, and it's not so easy to bottle it into different compartments. Usually in social science, you have a range of things, and what you now do is to say, okay, so this is a range of extreme poverty, this is a range of extreme wealth. But what we do is to try to bring a lot of people in so that we can have a level of, a level of wealth creation that helps everyone. So part of what we're seeing today is also very distinct lack of opportunities for people. So somebody goes to school. I get pathetic texts. I've graduated 10 years ago, and I'm unable to get a job. And my parents are no longer able to cater for me. And so you see those type of frustrations, and it just continues to build. And so we need to, no matter which party you belong, no matter which creed, look at that. If you noticed also, part of the biggest problems we had from the Northwest, Northeast, and so on, was that there was always a ready pool of impressionable youth who could be recruited into all this Boko Haram and so forth. No education, coming out from an Almajiri system, abandoned, and so what do you see? So that is also part of the problems that afflict us in the South. And until we deal with that, we'll always have people who will be turned the other way.
This must be an opportune moment. A lot of the problems that we have as a country dovetail around application of the rules, consequences of those rules, unintended and intended. Those doing the applying, how sincere are they to the spirit and the letter of the rules, and so on. We've done a lot of amending since 1999, if we don't go further back than that. Virtually every assembly does its own amendment process. The amendment process is cumbersome, but every assembly does it. The question will be, to what end? What's the objective? And even if the objectives were clearly defined, do they eventually achieve them? Now, I talked about the whole issue of, no, we need to rejig the governance architecture. This is where our problem is. And there are those who have argued that, no, that is not our problem. But if you say it is, then let's do it. Here is constitutional amendment process. The National Assembly's major role is to make laws for the good governance of the country. Go to the National Assembly. A number of such people don't want to come to the National Assembly because they say the National Assembly is part of the problem. and they therefore want another process that bypasses, so to speak, the National Assembly. That's there. On the other hand, the National Assembly itself does not seem to have the stomach to go ahead and do some of the painful things that are necessary to ensure that some of the agitations can be taken care of by a simple or not so simple reallocation or returning around of the rules. take electoral reform or devolution of powers. Those are two clear examples. But then, and this is the third leg, there are those who say there's nothing wrong with the rules. No rules are ever perfect. It's those who are doing the applying. That's so no matter how many times you change the rules or you adjust the rules, if those applying them remain the same and have the same attitude, you are going to have the same problem. You talked earlier on about Britain not having a constitution. But there are conventions. Everybody knows what those conventions are. So even when people who are not in the system show up within it, the system has a way of taking care of them in such a way that they don't damage the system. Which one of this is the situation that we have even around the noise of constitutional amendment? And in your view, do you think this particular process will achieve any results?
I tend to go with the last one. And I just gave you an example. The law was very clear. Section 152 of the Electoral Act says you cannot appoint somebody who is partisan or biased or something. Yet, we still got from Mr. President last week an aid of his, even for propriety's sake, even for convention's sake. Let's leave the law aside. How would you, as a president, take somebody who has been working with you in your office and say, go and be an unbiased umpire? How could that be? So, that's why I said I tend to go with the last one that you say. You cannot have a democracy if you're not a Democrat. And who is a Democrat? Must be somebody who is willing to abide by the laws and the rules of the entity that he is. So, if the law says that in this particular organization, the Federal Character Commission, the top positions must be shared between the North and the South, and it's right there in the law, and you decide that you won't do that, how can you now turn around and now say it is merely by amending the law? You understand? Because the next thing you're now telling everybody is, okay, go ahead and amend the law to say a president who does this type of nomination, despite the fact that there was a rule, will suffer consequence A, B, and how can you be rewriting the whole laws that way? So, to be very frank, there are too many things that are in our present constitution as it is, that if applied in the way it is there in the law, if done the way it's supposed to be done, will have resolved most of our issues. I'll just give you one example. The Southeast says we do not have anybody in the armed forces leadership, and so if you go to a meeting to decide what to do in the Southeast, there's no Southeasterner there. But the law actually in section 217, section 219 of the Constitution actually stipulates that the National Assembly should set up an agency that will advise Mr. President so that everybody inside the armed forces will abide by the law of federal character. It's there. But the day I now brought up that matter on the floor of the Senate, and say it is time for us to do what the law says. You saw what happened, so much, and everybody said, oh, I want to strip power from President Buhari, as if he was going to be president forever. No, his term was going to end. He had already appointed people, but this was to guide future presidents, so they don't continue to in that error against the Constitution. The sycophants are there to remind the apologies to Governor Ajimobi, to remind the constituted authorities that you have not shown sufficient reverence and so forth. You know, but I know that these are just phases in a society in which, as we continue to improve, we will continue to drop some of these habits. That's why I talked about apologies to Sita Chidok and now a Niger and a Nigeria. So all those youths in Niger who are going ahead and doing what they want to do and don't want to know what you're thinking, and developing their apps and doing international business and going ahead to do their own thing, are largely succeeding, because those things that tend to pull them back, they are dropping them and going on.
Distinguished Senator, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
It's my pleasure. Always a pleasure to talk with you, Ladi. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's hope that our country will get over these difficulties of the moment.
Amen.